killed a tow company with one simple phone call. I killed an entire tow company with one phone call. On mobile, so bear with me. Several years back I went to work for a towing company. It's about all I know how to do other than paint cars, which is drastically affecting my health. The pay was pretty decent, but we had to share trucks and the boss felt that he knew where we needed to sit in order to get the best calls. This is important for later. Several months in, I realized that I was not making the type of money that I should be making. So I took the opportunity, while I was sitting in a parking lot one evening, to start researching the laws pertaining to employees in similar positions. He was kind of an a-hole and the trucks had transponders, so that he could see if we had them idling with the air conditioner on a hot day, or idling with the heat on a cold day. He was always calling complaining about something, if the wheels were not turning. During my research I discovered that, if he was requiring us to sit in a certain parking lot, street, or any location of his choosing, then we were entitled to be paid an hourly wage, not just our commission. The technical term was engaged to wait. However, if he allowed us to freely roam about while we waited for calls, we were not entitled to hourly wages and we were therefore considered waiting to be engaged. I never mentioned this to him, but I did start taking note of my time. Another month or so goes by, and he decided to start coming down on me for tiny little BS. Things that ordinarily wouldn't even matter, such as I forgot a pop can in the cup holder. He actually had a screaming fit about that. At this point I was tired of working there and had already found another job, so I decided it was time to put my plan into motion. I called him up, told him that we needed to have a conversation about my final wages and that we could meet at his convenience. Upon entering the office I laid out my argument, explained the state law, and told him I expected to be paid for the hours that I was on the clock, but not freely allowed to roam looking for work or able to do things of my choosing. He told me in no uncertain terms would not be paid for that time, as that was agreed to upon my employment. I did not bother to argue, as I already had my next step planned, so I took my final check and I left. The following Monday, I made a phone call to the State Labor Board, where I laid out my case to them. Needless to say, they were very interested in what was going on. In the end, they came to review his employment records and speak to the driver still working. When he got the bill of what he had to pay us all, it was too much for him to afford, so he sold the trucks, his boat, and lot and went out of business. I never got the money owed to me in full, only a fraction. But the satisfaction of knowing the law just a little bit better than he did, and watching it all burn was pure bliss. TL, Doctor. Boss fucks us on legally entitled wages. I sink his company with one phone call. Group attempted to cut me out after I did about 60% of the work. They failed. This happened about 12 years ago while I was studying aeronautical engineering. Due to some money-grubbing legislation tactics, most who have gone to college know about the unnecessary courses that are tacked onto the degrees in order to graduate. One of those courses for my degree was a business class. Seriously, you'd think these guys would understand that most engineers don't do the business side of things. Thankfully, we had a teacher who was understanding of the fact that many of us in the class were bored out of our minds. I'll admit to having always been a geek/nerd who loved making good grades. If I don't understand something, I run at it hard to try to change that. This class stumped me for quite some time, and then a nightmare of a project was announced, one worth 50% of our grades. The school was a small one, the class a little more than 30 people, and I was assigned to work with 3 people I knew from other classes. We had problems straight away. 2 of the people remembered me from a calculus class that they barely passed as the person who sailed easily through, and decided to dump their portion of the work on me straight away, knowing I wouldn't allow myself to fail. They were right. At first my other group member tried to pick up the slack as well, pulling hard to do a difficult project in a subject we barely understood. I'll admit she was a trooper. Unfortunately, she was also someone easily manipulated, and our 2 slacking group members began applying pressure during the semester for her to take the work and allow them to present it. The day of the project finally comes, and I'm sick as a dog, pretty much quarantined in the clinic due to bronchitis. I managed to send a message to the teacher. The 2 slackers manage to wrangle the presentation from the girl who worked with me and presented it to the class, declaring that they had done all of the work and I was skipping class because they had told me that they were going to tell the teacher what happened. My initial grade was an F. I was beyond pissed until I realized something important. Part of the project involved a written report, of which I held the only copy since I was the one to type it up. Cue the revenge. Privately I went to the teacher with my notes and the report in order to get the grade I earned and to get him in on the plot. He agreed since it seemed fun and he planned to fail them anyway for academic dishonesty. Publicly, there was no report. The classmates that had attempted to take all the credit began to approach me, first demanding the report. Most of the time, my response was, "But I didn't do any work," in a sickly sweet voice. Next they attempted to act all buddy-buddy, trying to convince me that it had all been a joke and promising that they'd tell the professor that I had done some work, giving me some credit so that I had the possibility to pass. This was met with stony silence on most occasions before I told them that I'd rather fail than let them pass. Things escalated after that to include the door of my dorm room being rapped on at odd hours of the night, shoving, and them stealing my backpack and notebooks in order to try to find the report themselves. One of them even asked my roommate to let them search for a report I had written and forgotten for our group. Didn't have her as my roommate the following semester. Things finally came to a head on the last week of classes. I had held out on them for a month, not telling any of my group mates what I had done, and enough time had elapsed that, even if they were to turn in the report now, it would be so late that they'd still have failed. They hadn't even attempted to do the report themselves, and the girl who had worked with me was in hysterics over the very real possibility of failing the class. It was what the teacher and I had been waiting for, and he finally decided to return the reports. The two slackers glared daggers at me as the teacher returned the report of every other group in the class before stopping in front of them. He was holding what looked to be one extra report and they were immediately looking hopeful. He set a single sheet of paper on one of their desks before moving to the desk of the girl who had worked along with me and set the report on her desk. "I had to dock some points for dishonesty, but you and your partner did decently," he stated before moving on. My partner realized what I had done. We only got an 82 on our project, but it was far better than the 0 that our ex-group mates received. I had been carefully documenting the harassment that the two slackers had put me through and ensured several witnesses saw some of what they did. 2 days after being informed that they were failing, the pair had a new problem. I gave the evidence to the administration of our school and the teacher reported the academic dishonesty. The administration did a bit more digging and found that the pair had been making trouble for some time and a number of students reported similar problems of having their work stolen. The slackers were expelled. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.